Gustavo Pestana. And I work for the Regional Ministry for the Ecological Transition, Climate Change and Spatial Planning. It's a very long name for the department that I work for. So the organizers have asked me to moderate session 1 on governance. So, well, thank you for the faith that you have placed in me. So, governance. There are 196 states in the world. We do have the oceans. Well, the Russians want there to be another state, but we have 196 states in the world and one single ocean. And some states are landlocked, some are on the coast. We have 196 states that are involved at national level. And if we then go down the ladder and then we break down countries, we have even more people. And then we have islands, we have archipelagos, we have island regions, we have single islands, but we have archipelagos, island regions, and then the scale of the problem varies. And obviously the problems are very different on the island of Lanzarote or the island of Tenerife or the island of La Palma. So we therefore are going to need governance. This means creating networks, understanding each other, sitting down at the same table. At the European Union, we have different levels of governance. In Spain, we have what is very similar to a federal state, and then we have a federal breakdown of the island governments, the island council, the town councils, the groupings of town councils. And this is why we need governance and co-governance in political issues, but across every level of society. So therefore, we're going to be looking at the jurisdictional frameworks in which we operate. Now, we need to be able to explain that someone has competence over this or that task, and we also have to focus on the island issues. So we need to have first and foremost a global strategy, and then we need to work from top to bottom. No, we need to work from the global to the local and from the local to the global. No, working up and down the ladder. Now the Caribbean and the Mediterranean are not going to be the same as Macaronesia or the Central Atlantic region, which is the region that we find ourselves in. So therefore, we have a wide spectrum of expert speakers today, and the idea is that I speak as little as possible and that they speak at length, and then you can ask them questions. We have simultaneous interpretation for those that require it, and at 2 o'clock we have lunch laid on outside, and then we have a coffee break. There is a Malay Silence app as well, and the organizers ask me to inform you about this so you can download it. So let's now listen from Carlos Díaz Rivero, a colleague of mine who has a degree in economic sciences from the University of Laguna. He has taken master's degrees in environmental impact assessment and business management. He has been working as a private consultant up to 2005, and now he is tasked with European funding in the Department of Ecological Transition of the Canary Islands government, and he really covers a wide range of different issues. So, Carlos, you have the floor. Thank you, Gustavo, and thank you to all of you for being with us this morning. Now, I would like to give a public vote of thanks to our colleagues from AEBAM, because without your work, this would not have been possible. And at the same time, this is an exercise of governance and co-governance. So I'd like you to know that this first edition of Malay Silence is being held now in Puerto Cruz thanks to the agreements between various different levels of government, because we decided that we needed to talk about the issue of marine litter in isolated remote island regions. So This all ties in with the work that we're doing, and I'm going to try to give you a brief presentation, which will conclude with a video, because we said that images always say more than words. I would like to give you an idea of the position of governments, particularly those that are based in the outermost regions. So what are the outermost regions? These are the outermost regions of the European Union. There are 9 different regions that belong to some of the 3 of the 27 EU member states. And you can see the geographical context of the outermost regions across the planet. You can see that they're scattered across the globe, from the Azores in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, La Reunion, an island in the middle of the Indian Ocean, and then we have all of the regions in Latin America and Micronesia in the Atlantic. So Articles 349 and 345 of the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union enshrines the principles of outermost regions, and they're great examples of governance. We have these distant regions like French Guiana, Saint Martin, La Reunion, the Canary Islands. All of us speak and sit down at the same table. In fact, this week there is a parallel meeting in the Canary Islands. The Regional Policy Commission of the European Union Commission is here, together with Regio, the Department of the European Commission on Regional Policy. And therefore, we are here to talk together about the issues that affect the outermost regions and to take these to the European Union. They are very disparate regions, very remote regions, and we often talk to the other outermost regions and become aware of the fact that many of the problems that we have to overcome are very similar in nature. So there is a difference that is established in the TFEU regarding the outermost regions, and in the acquis communautaire of the European Union, there are certain benefits that are afforded to us in the outermost regions. There are certain privileges that are afforded to us because we are, as we say, outermost regions, and therefore we look at whatever is done through the European Union, and they tend to benefit us. In fact, there are favorable steps that are always taken by the EU to support us. So, therefore, my presentation is about the outermost regions as micro-laboratories for the European Union. If we look at the marine space, which is what we will be talking about over the next 2 days, this is a sphere in which we need to work. In fact, the European Union are fully apprised of the fact that there is potential for working in the marine environment, because we can be a laboratory. We can study certain areas that are more difficult to study in the continental Europe. So we have specific context. We see that there are problems for us in the islands, but if we look at research and development, there are many areas in which we can spearhead research efforts. Now, specifically talking about marine litter, we are hugely affected this because the Atlantic Ocean currents bring the litter to our shores. The trade wind also brings a lot of litter to our shores, and this causes huge problems for local government in terms of cost and management. And we do live in a globalized world, and this is a problem that is overwhelming the capacity to deal with it here. We can see that nature is being overrun by waste. In fact, we have studied this. We have a snapshot of all of the marine litter, and it's quite surprising where this comes from. We can sometimes ascertain exactly where that marine litter originates and when it originated. And really, if we look at the figures, we are astonished by the origin and scale of marine litter. So, therefore, what possibilities are provided to us by the European Union because of the fact that we are an outermost region? Well, for Brussels, all activities related to marine resources and the oceans are already strategic elements for the entire European Union, because the EU recognizes the importance of being able to conserve our oceans at a certain level of quality, because part of human activity has this relationship with our oceans. So, therefore, the EU has a raft of different funds and policies, and they have specific funding allocations for the outermost regions to tackle their specific features. And you can see on the screen the ones that we work with most frequently. They have ERDF funding 2021-2027. In Gran Canaria, we have the kickoff meeting with the European Commission. Then we have the Interreg MAC program. This will be passed in April, May. And then we have the Life Plus program. These are three instruments of the European Union that the status of being an outermost region gives us extra benefits. No, there are extraordinary budgetary allocations through these funds for us in the outermost regions. Next slide. We have Ocean Lit. This is a project that we've been developed to study and manage marine litter, and this was co-financed by the second of the programs that we have mentioned, the Interreg MAC program. This is an inter-regional cooperation program that brings together the different regions, in this case Macaronesia, Interreg MAC. So we have the Ocean Lit plan that we've drawn up now for 2023, and it works on three different areas of work. First, knowledge and innovation, so that we can generate knowledge on the issues and to be able to come up with solutions to help in the decision-making process for local government bodies. The next area is waste management, so we want to be able to implement improvements in the island waste management programs so that we can also tackle marine litter in all of the different phases of waste management. So we have urban solid waste management systems, but we also need to be able to tackle marine litter. Now, this is not something that had been considered in the past. This is another aspect for this particular project, the Ocean Lit project. And then another pillar of this project that we are spending money and resources on is outreach and participation. In fact, really, this conference is in line with this, the third pillar of the Ocean Lit program. So what have we done to date in the Ocean Lit program? We have specific goal number one, knowledge. We have studied and gathered data on marine litter that have been located in specific ecosystems in Macaronesia. And we've also carried out outreach and awareness-raising activities. In fact, if you look at the top photo on the right-hand side, this is going to help you to gain a greater idea of exactly what we're doing. We have provided this to the regional ministries of education across the different regions. And really, when we're working with the European Union, they always emphasize the fact that we need awareness raising. We need European citizens to fully understand where the funding is being invested. Now, so this really is illustrative of the work that we've been doing. So to conclude, actions that are currently being implemented. 2023, this is from the previous funding tranche from the Interreg program. So this is what is left for us to do. We're going to continue on educational methods for schools, education, particularly in schools. In fact, tomorrow, a group of school children are going to be here, and they're going to sort marine litter. So this is part of the outreach education activities, awareness-raising activities on marine litter, and citizen science, participation of locals in the process. So I would ask you to now play the video for us, and then in the Q&A session, you can make any comments, remarks, or questions. Thank you.
Rodeadas por más de 2.000 kilómetros de costas. Lugares singulares únicos que han propiciado una conexión ancestral entre sus habitantes y el océano Atlántico. Fuente de alimentación y espacio de ocio y disfrute para todos. En Canarias se encuentran una gran cantidad de espacios marinos incluidos en la red Natura 2000. Algunos de ellos albergan hábitats y especies únicas. Además, en nuestras aguas encontramos ricos ecosistemas donde habitan especies amenazadas a nivel internacional, como las tortugas marinas, el calderón tropical, el delfín mular o diversos tiburones. Con más de 2 millones de habitantes, cada año las islas son visitadas por unos 15 millones de turistas. Una concentración de población que genera una considerable huella ecológica, no solo sobre nuestro territorio, sino también sobre el medio marino que nos rodea. Debido a nuestro estilo de vida basado en el consumismo extremo, cada año generamos millones de toneladas de residuos que acaban, en el mejor de los casos, colapsando nuestros vertederos y, en el peor de los casos, abandonados en el medio natural. El viento, la lluvia o simplemente la acción humana hacen que cada año muchos de los residuos generados en tierra acaben en medio del océano convertidos en basura marina. Botellas de plástico, bolsas, latas de cerveza o refrescos, mascarillas quirúrgicas, sandalias de bañistas, redes abandonadas o artes de pesca perdidas, colillas, son solo algunos de los residuos que podemos encontrar en nuestros mares y costas. Una parte importante de las basuras marinas está formada por diferentes tipos de plásticos. Con el paso del tiempo, estos residuos se van partiendo formando partículas cada vez más pequeñas hasta convertirse en microplástico. Un tipo de residuo que ha logrado introducirse en las cadenas alimenticias de buena parte de los seres marinos del océano y que de forma indirecta aparece en nuestro organismo al consumir pescado. Nuestro estilo de vida está convirtiendo el mar en un auténtico vertedero. La basura que abandonamos en nuestra costa puede acabar, por ejemplo, en el estómago de una ballena al otro lado del planeta debido a las corrientes y al viento, que hacen viajar las basuras marinas hasta convertirlas en trampas mortales para muchos animales y nosotros mismos. Desde el proyecto Ocean Lead, financiado por la Unión Europea y en el que participa como socio la Viceconsejería de Lucha contra el Cambio Climático y Transición Ecológica del Gobierno de Canarias, se pretende dar a conocer el impacto real de las basuras marinas sobre los diferentes espacios naturales protegidos costeros del archipiélago, además de proponer soluciones para minimizar la generación de residuos y la mejora del sistema de gestión de residuos, así como el impacto de las basuras en los ecosistemas marinos y su divulgación. Para ello es vital tu colaboración. El mar no puede ser un contenedor de nuestra basura. Antes de comprar y consumir, por favor, piensa dónde van a terminar tus residuos.
Gracias, Carlos.
Thank you, Carlos, for your presentation and for your time. Let's move on now to the second presentation, which will be about the different levels of governance against plastic pollution. It will be presented by Magali Outers. I hope I have pronounced it properly. My English is horrible, so you can imagine my English. She's an engineer of materials at the University of Toronto. She has significant experience. She also holds a master in industrial engineering, as well as some other postgraduate courses. She's worked in sustainable products and in the Mediterranean area. She has also developed different specific tools and pilot initiatives for governments. That's why her experience is so important here. And she's currently coordinating policy areas of MEDWAVES in Barcelona, which is a Mediterranean action at the regional center, which is working with different stakeholders, such as companies and governments. And she's working with everybody for the integration and innovation of sustainable companies, prevention of pollution, and the spread of pollutants in the Mediterranean. Without further ado, we will move to her, who will be probably more interesting than myself. Thank you very much for this brief introduction. Now the expectations are high. I'll try to be brief on how, from our center, we try to work on governance to reduce plastic pollution. Given the institutional structure of our center, we are involved in global initiatives and also at regional level, meaning the Mediterranean area, but we also work at local level. We have here a brief introduction of the center. We're working for international cooperation, working to promote circular economy and sustainable consumption across the Mediterranean. There are 21 countries in the Mediterranean, as you can see in the map, including the countries in the north of Africa. And we support two international treaties. One of them is the Barcelona Convention, which is working at the regional level in the Mediterranean, and which is similar to the one proposed by OSPAR, working in the northeast Atlantic. Well, so we do the same thing for the Mediterranean, and we are also working on the structure of the Stockholm Convention on Persistent Organic Pollutants, which is a global convention which is linked to plastic. At the beginning, it was very much focused on other persistent organic pollutants such as pesticides, but now we are working more on industrial POPs, which some of them are additive, which are used in the production of plastic. And this is very much tackled by this convention. And we are a result of the collaboration agreement between the Spanish Ministry on Environment and the government of Catalonia. The marine litter has become a priority for our center, and we are working on this topic from a preventive or from prevention. We're trying to create initiatives to stop this plastic from reaching the sea and working with the highest or the top levels of the value chain. So we see, if we talk about governance, we see that each level is very important because they are all interdependent and each one of them has a role to play. But I would like to start by talking about the global level, because we have perceived that at this point we need to make greater efforts, because the plastic pollution is within a global chain, and we have litter in the sea that travels across borders. So we need to reach agreements on what the rules should be. A year ago, that we held the UNEA, the United Nations Assembly on Environment, and which could be considered as a historic assembly, a historic agreement, where all countries decided to create a new treaty on plastic pollution. This has been on the table for many years, but from a very marginal perspective. And we saw that there were some limits, some limitations, and we had to escalate in the value chain. And that was the main goal of this convention. We were trying to regulate and maybe reduce the plastic production. That would be a great achievement, but the road to get to that agreement is a very long one, but at the same time it's short because we only have 2 years to go to reach an agreement. At the moment there are only 170 countries involved in this project negotiating. They are at the INC, which is an intergovernmental negotiating committee. The first one was held in Uruguay, where governments meet other associations to express their will and their vision to be included in this treaty. And now, step by step, we need to be more specific and reach a common point of view for a common treaty. At the moment, the objective is clear, but the solutions provided or suggested are very diverse because maybe some of the stakeholders are affected by the reduction of plastics and some others are plastic production. So I hope we end up reaching an important solution for the rest of levels. This treaty has to take into consideration other initiatives. It must be complemented by the Basilea Treaty, for instance, that is regulating the different Basel Treaty, that is regulating other types of waste. And this is included in this convention. There are many other global initiatives that can be introduced as well that have a space within this new agreement. We also need to take into consideration everything that is being done at the regional level, and this leads us to the convention, to the Barcelona Convention, which has been operating for many years and which gathers 21 Mediterranean countries. In the Barcelona Convention, the sea plays a key role. In 2013, we developed a regional plan that is legally binding, and that was the first plan on marine litter. And 2 years ago, at the end of 2021, we passed a second plan, including more measures, because we realized that it was necessary to reinforce the existing measures and to create new ones to prevent greater pollution. And this had all our support, especially in the field of circular economy and in the inclusion of toxic additives in order to reduce the toxicity levels of plastic. And this is a very important instrument for governance because this allows countries to agree on different measures and to define timelines and targets. And based on that, we work supporting the implementation of these measures that is later on followed by monitoring and harmonization procedures, which are also very important. If we speak at from regional, we go to local. And I know the time is short, and I won't have time to speak about this in depth, but it is also important because the commitments that are reached at a global level and regional level must be implemented at national level. So we work with countries from southern Mediterranean, from the south of the Mediterranean. This is the case of Tunis, for instance, where we supported the adoption of a decree to regulate the single-use plastic bags. But we are also working with Algeria, or Jordan, Morocco, Lebanon, and other countries on similar projects. These are very long processes where governance is important because we need to sit at the table, not only public entities, but also private entities, to guarantee success. And then at local level, which I think is a very important level. Here we have heroes and heroines who are facing problems every day and trying to change mindsets by implementing everything that has been decided at the global and regional and national level. And from our center, we try to give them visibility by supporting them in the exchange of experiences and by granting them the necessary tools to act. Here you can see a book that has been recently published that was presented just at the coffee break. We were there with SMILO. We've been working with them on this project. And we have been working on Mediterranean islands on plastic pollution. And in this publication, we are trying to give these entities a voice because they have implemented different actions that need to be known. I think this graphic here is necessary to summarize what we are doing. Many initiatives come from the local sphere, then move to the national level, which has a stronger legislative framework. And this is probably in the Mediterranean. This is where we have to make the greatest effort, especially in the Mediterranean, because it's a shared space that we need to talk a lot with the other partners to see how we can protect it. And because sometimes the problems we have are global, not only regional. So if we have common rules or guidelines, the result will be the better. Thank you very much. Yeah. That was pretty fast, thank you. The next speaker will be, let's see if I can pronounce it. Is it Sylvain Petit? Did I say it correctly? Yes. He's the Executive Secretary of SMILO, the Association for Small Islands. He has a Master in Economy and Geography by the University of Aix, Marseille and Maine. After working as a geographist in tourism and conservation, he is now working on sustainable development. And my phone is ringing now. Okay, sorry about that. In sustainable development in small islands, where he's been responsible for implementing a strategy and different programs for coastal areas, especially in Split in Croatia. And sorry about this again. And he's going to speak about the label for sustainable islands. And then pass the floor to him now.
Buenos días. Gracias por la presentación.
Thank you for the introduction. Thanks to the team of Malay Islands for the invitation. Thanks also to the government of the Canary Islands. Thanks also to my colleagues from MEDWAVES. My Spanish is rather rudimentary, so I'm going to continue now in English.
That you will be able to follow. So I'm very happy to be here to present what SMILO is doing when talking about the topic of governance. As an organization, we've developed a label for small sustainable islands, and that's what I will be discussing today. So we are a French-based NGO working with small islands around the world. And when talking about small islands, we had to come up with our own definition. So the territories we work with, they are smaller than 150 square kilometers. So for example, Tenerife, for us, it's a continent, no? But there are islands we are looking towards, and that's something I'm happy to discuss these days in the area of Fuerteventura, islands that gravitate around this. But this is just to fit the discussions during the 2 days. Our focus is on the sustainable development of islands, but we cannot do all, so we decided to break down sustainable development in 5 themes, which we're trying to address. And this is water, wastewater, waste. And that's when we'll be discussing about marine litter. All these themes, we consider them both on land and at sea. We work on the topic of energy as well, biodiversity, and the landscape, which is also the cultural component, let's say. The major action where we spend most of our time and efforts is the governance aspect. So that's what I'll be focusing this talk on. And then we're also discussing with different sectors and private actors. And mostly in all the islands where we work, we're talking about tourism, fisheries, agriculture, and some handcrafts in some places. This is quickly a map of the islands where we work with, and something we cultivate as a DNA of our organization is try to make some connections between islands that will never meet, but they have much to say. We believe that a guy on an island in Norway has a lot to exchange with the guy in the northern part of Madagascar. All islands are the same. I like to say that to be provocative, but they share some concerns, they share something that's very special. We're touching on this also after. You see here two colors just to shed some light on this. Some of the islands are in blue. That's the islands that are part of this labeling process I'll be describing. The others are just part of our network. That means that we have organizations, being local authorities, being NGOs, being universities that are partnering with us. I go back. You see that there is missing any Spanish islands, but we have contact, so again, that's something that's of interest for me. So the islands are the same. Okay, that's something to discuss. We believe that the ties, when talking about governance of these specific territories, these strong ties that exist, especially on these small islands, they're very positive when it comes to share information, to share knowledge, to build solidarity, to be able to mutualize efforts. So something that is very specific to islands. At the same time, the density of these ties, the long connection, the family story, etc., they also are sometimes something that doesn't able the change, leads to inertia, doesn't really, maybe sometimes also leads to the exclusion of some people, groups of people, etc. So our challenge, where we try to intervene, as I was telling you, to spend a lot of time when talking about Mediterranean island, that means you have to drink a lot of coffee with people, not just coffee sometimes, be able to understand that these conflicts around the management of resources, they can be managed. We try to overcome, to help the local actors to overcome these potential issues. That's really what we try to do, be just oil in the mechanisms. And we believe that more than in any other territories, this governance needs to be nurtured, it needs to be taken care of. And that's through this good governance, try to gain confidence with the actors. That's how we can step forward towards a future where you have good environmental status that will resonate with a quality of life development. And we also believe that the insularity and its specifics, one of which being this relation between people, is not just a burden, but it's a strength. And that's something that can be a fertile ground for innovation, being technical, being technological, but also being social. So we have developed this label. Well, we are like now 6 years old organization. We have ties with the different institutional partners, one of which being the French Coastal Agency. The label here described very briefly. This is basically the wheel that you can see there with different steps, and it's a set of methods and tools that I will not go into details here. Just want to shed the light on the cornerstone of it all is the island committees we invite the islands to have. Sometimes there is such an agora on islands, sometimes there is not. For us, the basic idea is to have around the table the local authorities, the private sector, and mostly we're talking about agriculture, fisheries, as I was saying before, and also the civil society. And there we'll work a lot with the local associations, NGO, etc. There is also the elected people. We work with the local democracy, as it is. And then sometimes we are here to try and set the good criteria and help the islands to have on board the right people. And that's sometimes if I go back to the scheme that Magali was presenting, on one island, if the prerogatives for waste management belong to the municipality on the bigger island next to the small one, then in this island committee you need to invite those guys. So what we try and do is set this stage, help this body of governance to exist, to function. Here we like to say that we agitate a little flag of neutrality, which is very helpful to discuss those different themes, to discuss long-term perspectives, because when they come to this island committee under the banner of Smilo, that means that the fishermen and somebody else will not be complaining to the metropolis or to the mayor about the problem of whatever is going on the island, which is very much important, but it's not the topic of this agora, which is set to help structure the strategic planning for the island and to work on concrete aspects such as the one of marine litter. Then the diagnosis of the island on the 5 themes of Smilo, so on waste, on water, of energy, we try and help the island to take a picture of what is the state of the art on that island in terms of water, waste, etc. This needs to be understood and heard by all. One thing that is a positive also, quick positive, let's say, outcome of this is that in many places we realize that things are happening, but the different actors are not aware of. Metropolis can be working in one area on waste and have a program of work that the guys that work on water never heard of. Things are actually happening, but they don't know. So we try to break down, to integrate, try to get out of the silo approach. Then based on that diagnostics, we try and push the islanders to establish goals that are understood by all, and that are the sum of all the different actions they have in plans, and some of them that need to be defined together. And again, our role is try to oil the wheel. So one of the things also we try and push forward is the reduction of inequalities, and that's a broad topic. That means we talk about gender issue, we talk about migration, we're talking about many aspects of how this island governance should be fed, and it's not something that's fixed, that needs to evolve and be alive. So I'm very happy to tell you more if anybody is interested on those different blocks and all this different process of this labeling, which really I need to say here, it's not, cannot be understood as a certification process as something like ISO or something like that. We're talking about something that tries to recognize the dynamic on the island. To get the label, the first thing you need to do is to have this island committee in place and functioning, and to have to have understood the situation on the island, that means the diagnosis, and then also the definition of a strategic plan. This is for us the first proof of a local dynamic. It's not, and the objectives are set by the island for the island, and our role is to make sure that the island is ambitious enough. Okay, and then 4 points to finish. 4 points of our strategy, the global strategy of the NGO, to help the island voices, to islands to work and the island voices to be heard. We work on of course, on the reinforcement of the local governance, as I said. We also try to secure some funds to support concrete projects for the islands that have been going through this labeling process, and so we support actions that help better understand the challenges of marine litter. For example, we support small action that goes from some cleanups, which is always needed on a small island. As we were saying, there might not be the cause, but they have to deal with these things. We try to always to find funds that are like, it's often called the first fruit to grasp, something that the community on the island can see. It can be a tractor to do the cleanups. It can be some garbage bins, or it can be trainings for the people on the island to be able to recycle green waste, for example, etc. Something very practical that the communities can see, touch. Then when talk about the enhancement of the management of the resources, so this was the point. Then the strength of local technical capacity. One of the things we try and do is to make connections between islands and have the islanders tell the others what they do. Magali pointed out one project we had together within the BMED program. It was about plastics and solutions to tackle plastic pollution in the Mediterranean that totally fit into our program of work, since it was a lot of exchanges and of good practices between islanders. It's something we cultivate. We try to be a facilitator, try to bring those islanders to the others, and so that they can exchange and learn. We also try to work on two aspects when talking about local capacities. It's the capacity to manage, and that's mostly for the NGOs, let's say. Try to work with them on their capacity to write a project, to manage a project, to market a project. We also sometimes help them with the communication aspects. And on the other hand, we try and work with different experts, again feeding from this network of islanders, or to empower the communities in terms of knowledge on the issues of water, what are the challenges on marine litter, what are the challenges, etc. And finally, we are an international network, so we try to be the connections between the island and what's happening at the international stage. And so we try to raise the voices of islands for them to be heard and show that they may be a laboratory, but they're also pioneers and they are inspiring territories. And I think that's what's needed the most sometime today, show that things are actually happening, even though we know we're screwed. Well, if we go back to the Antarctica things we saw in the morning, we know that we are in a deep, I'm not going to say the word, but things are still happening, and islands are really something, an area with actors that do things. So yeah, I think that they bring a little bit of hope, what we definitely need. And muchas gracias a todos.
Ana Rodriguez from Puerto Rico. She has a degree in environmental engineering from North Carolina State University. She also has a master's degree in waste management and treatment from the Autonomous University of Madrid, and she has a postgrad degree in management and engineering from the Political University of Puerto Rico, where she also teaches undergraduate courses. She is one of the representatives of the International Board of the Puerto Rican Caribbean chapter of the North American Waste Management Organization, and as president of IEM-ESPSC, she is currently leading projects such as the characterization of waste throughout the island and the landfill gas for energy. And she herself says that she loves scuba diving, which has to be said at the end, and I will leave you with her and her presentation on her experience in waste management in Puerto Rico. Thank you.
Gracias.
Take a break. I'll try to continue. Thank you very much. I would like to thank you all for inviting me here. I'm usually taken to conferences to look for alternatives in terms of policies, or to, just shake the comb, I don't know, the honeycomb. So let's see what the result will be today. And I hope that I can bring you a different perspective. And I love listening to my colleagues speaking about global perspectives at the UN. We have very ambitious goals, but as it has already been mentioned, and as Gustavo mentioned, I represent some other realities integrating other islands in the Caribbean. The Caribbean is well recognized for its corruption, among other tiny details, and unfortunately, Puerto Rico is one of those islands, and now we're going through a very complex economic situation at the US, and this is basically some of the aspects that make me cringe at a certain level. And when I listen to these youngsters speaking about possible opportunities to get funds and how they have all agree on the same topics to get the best result, this is very difficult on our different islands. But today, and this is what we are going to be speaking about this today, because Puerto Rico, when it comes to, or when we speak about Puerto Rico, there are 5 million people living there, and we are also an archipelago. Some islands are populated, some others aren't, and it is sometimes hard for us to manage this archipelago. As I said, we are facing different economic difficulties, but from the perspective that passionates me the most, which is waste management, I have to say that fortunately, the Federal Agency for Environment Protection has allowed us to reduce the number of landfills on the island, and we are still working on this. We're operating under 11 federal orders, and some of these landfills should have closed some time ago, but there are still some mayors that are, protecting their jurisdiction or their areas very fiercely, and we are not closing those landfills yet. But we are still working on how to process waste before they reach the landfill. So we depend very much on our recycling industry, because the segregation is done to send it to international markets. Our industry production is very limited, except from the pharmaceutical industry, which is understood to have a very high recycling level. Some of them are moving in the field of 60-80%. It sounds perfect indeed, but it is not well recognized. So unfortunately, we see Puerto Rico as an island where the recycling figures are below 10%. And we can talk about these figures during coffee break if you wish. But as you can see here, we generate more than 2.5 kilos per person per day. That's the waste generation rate in Puerto Rico. These are the figures we have reached from our research. And also, as I mentioned before, recycling rates are very low. We have main problems in the management of waste management is the management of landfills. We have no way to have such a nice system as the one you have here in Spain. You have these integrated management systems there because we haven't been able to develop them. We haven't oiled the wheel because we haven't been able to close the cycle. But I've also listened to some other alternatives in these 2 days that maybe can exacerbate the idea that the lack of money to improve structures is something that can be tackled. Maybe I will take some notes and learn from all of you. I would also like to highlight the fact that over the years we have had additional challenges. Puerto Rico comes on the news because Cheyenne or Ricky Martin are singing, or because of other pieces of news, such as the ones you can see here. There is our history is divided into pre-Hurricane Maria and post-Hurricane Maria. That's a reality that has been already installed in our genes. This had a great impact, had a substantial impact, especially on landfills. And some months before my friend Maria visited Puerto Rico, we were were debating on similar fora like this on how the hell are we going to manage to close these illegal landfills. We were working with NGOs, we were working with community associations, we were sharing ideas and problems on Facebook, and suddenly Maria arrived. And this changed everything, and we forgot everything we were talking about. And this is quite similar to what is happening to those pieces of news related to tires, for instance, on the misuse of tires, which is something that I will mention in a couple of minutes. Now, I would like to focus on marine litter, that from the perspective of disaster management, which is one of my passions, I would like to highlight that coasts have had a serious impact, not only after the series of hurricanes, but also a particular event that happened back in 2020 when the island was affected by several earthquakes. After that, we took our looks back to the coast, and I have to highlight that, yes, we are an U.S. territory, and they have passed what they have called the SOS Act, the Safe Our Seas Act. This act promotes some action related to the proper management of marine litter, but how can we work, how can we operate in Puerto Rico through this SOS Act? Well, we do get some money for research and to create some workshops and some other aspects, such as creating a curriculum about marine waste. This is great, but this is not solving anything. So as I said before, these storms come and go. Unfortunately, this version of this presentation is before the one that I hope that you get, but in the new one you will see some pictures of some floods caused by one of these easy hurricanes, as we call them in the Caribbean. But the southwest of the island was flooded substantially, and very big, extensive plots of lands had a strong impact, a very serious impact, and we could see the amount of waste that ended up in the sea. So, as we can see, we do see some positive aspects from the political or in terms of policies. We do need to recognize that the environment in the Caribbean is constantly changing, even in the microclimates within the islands. That's something we were talking about yesterday. We were talking about when we were talking about the volcanoes. For instance, if I drive 5 minutes away from my house or my office, I can see that it is raining at my place, then it's not raining at the office, then it is super windy at my parents' place. So microclimates are technically a disaster for islands, and this makes management even more difficult. Then, if we talk about microplastics, I have to say that there are several NGOs working on this topic, and there are also some initiatives at federal level, such as the one promoted by NOAA or the Basura Cero. And we have been involved in some of these organizations, and I hope I can answer some of your questions later on. But here is my topic. We have the concept that Puerto Rico has a ridiculously high density of roads. We have a very difficult problem to tackle this problem we have with tires, and we continue buying cars every day. So it's a very big problem for our government. So the number of tires is astonishing, and I found this research paper, and at least from my perspective, I can see how this overproduction of tires is affecting the production of microplastics. So I hope you can have a hint of my perspective here, some general idea. Here you have some ideas that I have recycled as a good waste manager. Thank you for your attention, and I'm open to answer any questions you may have. Thank you. I would like to thank you all for meeting the time restrictions we had, and now we are going to have a debate moment. I have some questions here, but I would be very happy if you ask questions yourself. So if you don't have questions, I will just start the fire, I will spark the fire. I would love that you ask questions. Then you are invited for lunch or to have coffee if you ask a question. No questions? Then so yeah, I thought that's what would happen. So I will start myself. So I will start with Carlos. Although he's sitting far away from me, I will start asking you a question. And following what Hannah has just mentioned, we'll talk about money. Of course, the marine litter is the consequence of the consumerism of current society. But to solve this problem, we need funds, we need money. And I know what you do, and I know that the European funds will be launched this year. That has been postponed because of what happened back in 2020. That's the pandemic. I would like Carlos to mention some more ideas about the funds and how you could access them from the operational point of view, and of course focusing on the topic of waste management. Yeah, that's the bad thing of being a friend. Now I will be the first one to answer questions. But just listening to Hannah, one retains this perspective of how lucky we are to be living in the Canary Islands, because the access to funds in the Canary Islands, if compared to the Puerto Rican reality, is quite different. We are indeed in the first world in this sense. Unfortunately, there is not equality. Because us, as outermost region and being a region of the European Union, allows us to access different funding sources in an with many advantages. Now, of course, as has been just stated, we are delayed, and tomorrow we will be launching the ERDF Canary Islands for the period 2022-2027. Following the pandemic period, and in parallel to the ERDF, which has 500 million euros, is also complemented by Interreg, which is also feeding different projects that we are developing with other regions in the Macaronesian area. If we need to add figures or talk about figures, the 21-27 Interreg MAG is equipped with 200 million euros with a co-financing rate of 85%. This allows us, in practice, to dream and to materialize many of the ideas we are developing at the moment are then translated into research projects and cooperation, and also in the possibility to create co-governance within the Macaronesian region with our partners. Most of them are here today, those coming from Madeira, and Azores and Cape Verde. And for the first time, this year, the European Union is opening these funds to African countries, which some of them may have some connections, some cultural connections with the European Union countries, and nowadays they don't have them anymore. But these 4 countries that were present in the 4 regions that are Cape Verde, Azores, Madeira, and Cape Verde are joined by Senegal, Gambia, Mauritania, Côte d'Ivoire, and São Tomé and Príncipe. So there will be a total of 7 states or regions which will have very clear and accessible opportunities to collaborate in different projects, especially on SMEs and RD&I, with a very specific goal that is linked to the second goal, political goal of the European Union, which includes all transition projects, meaning biodiversity, circular economy, environmental transition, etc. So here we have many possibilities that are being translated into facts that will, for the next call that will be open next April or May, because this will be a key instrument for funding, especially to promote co-governance policies with all the partners. In this case, Interreg MAC is limited to these countries and regions, so the Mediterranean area is not included. There is another Interreg for the Atlantic area, which includes all the regions that are included in the Mediterranean area, excluding the United Kingdom after Brexit. And there are so many other instruments, funding instruments, that are ready to project cooperation and to develop cooperation among territories in different topics, or regions who share the same problems, such as the marine litter. So I invite you all to participate. Just don't hesitate to contact me at the government, because that's my job to help you with this. So I hope that next time we meet is at a partnership meeting to explore new projects. Unfortunately, we can't reach Puerto Rico yet.
¿Una pregunta o continúo yo?
Any more questions, or shall I continue? Now I work on issues related to climate change, and when you begin to focus on this, well, you understand it's a global problem that has to be tackled locally, and marine litter is a global problem. We have different levels of development, different priorities. So this is a question really for the 3 of you. You work in the Mediterranean with the Barcelona Convention. We have a new global treaty on plastics. But the reality of northern Mediterranean, European shores, is very different to the reality of southern Mediterranean, the Maghreb and Egypt. So how do partners see these differences? I've been in Morocco and Tunisia, and we see deficient waste management systems. And then you go to countries, neighboring countries, and the reality is very different. So how do you see these disparities in marine litter? Yes, there are many differences. It's true that the northern side of the Mediterranean basin has to comply with European regulations. This doesn't exist in the southern part of the Mediterranean. So certainly we need to do a lot of capacity building, training efforts based mainly on the southern Mediterranean countries where they don't yet have a regulatory framework in place. And in fact, much of the work that they do is inspired by what is being done in Europe. No, each individual country has its own approach. And then with regards to marine litter, if a measure is going to be adopted, then we have to really think about local consumption patterns. Because in Italy, they probably don't use the same single-use plastics as they do in Tunisia. So when we're working at national level, certainly, we have to gather data on production and consumption. And then from there, we have to try and better understand what will be the most effective measures. Should there be a direct ban? If not, are there available alternatives in the country if there is a ban in place? And then awareness raising as well. So there's a whole dashboard of different approaches, and we always have to focus this locally. Then if we scale it up to the global level, certainly there are many discussions that have arisen because of the new treaty. And it's very interesting to see the positions of the different countries. First, there's a group of countries that say, yes, we have to curb plastic production. And then others say, no, we have to stop polluting our land and sea environments. And there are different approaches, different positions taken, and this has a knock-on effect on the policies being adopted. And some say, yes, let's carry on as we did in the past, and then others say, no, we have to stop and properly treat and manage our waste so that it doesn't reach the seas. And then others who say, no, this is not enough. We need to introduce much more stringent measures. And then others who say we need a bottom-up approach, or we need a more flexible treaty, whereby each country can decide on its own national action plan, where they can introduce their measures, and then they can do it their own way. Then others will say, no, this is not going to be effective enough. We need specific measures. We need to set out the rules of the game at global level. No, we need to reduce production of plastic. We need defined targets. And then other countries that want to completely do away with single-use plastics or non-essential plastics and toxic chemicals as well. In the last meeting, there was wide-ranging recognition of the problem of toxic chemicals in plastics that need to be regulated, because there's no transparency. When we began to work on this many years ago, we saw that there were about 100 chemical substances associated with the production of plastics. Now we're talking about 13,000 substances associated with the production of plastics. Not all are toxic, but many of them are toxic. And there's very little information on these substances. So we've gone full circle. And now what we need to do is strengthen transparency, and we need to do it at global level. And if we have the right kind of mechanisms, it will become much easier. We've seen, the production of plastic, the oil comes from one country, it's manufactured in another country, then consumed in another country, and then ends up in developing countries. So it is an entire cycle. We need to look at this. We need to look at the right type of funding mechanisms as well. Because we can see what's happening in terms of climate change. And this also ties in with plastic, the production of plastic and marine litter. And we have countries, developing countries, that are not necessarily producing plastics, but they're going to be affected by plastic, by the marine litter that's going to end up in our seas. And so I'll leave it there for now. Thank you. So, Sylvain. Surprised by the fact that you call Tenerife a continent. I come from an even smaller island, but yeah, okay, Tenerife is not that big an island, and we have Puerto Rico as well. But Okay, we can talk about island continents, but all islands have a problem, which is dependence on the outside. Energy policies are much more complicated. We want to have energy mitigation measures. They're much more difficult to implement on islands because of the economies of scale. Then if you come back to plastics, I've heard that there's an island between small island states that are not in favor of policies to reduce plastics because it's going to make it more expensive to import them, no, because of these economies of scale. So how do you overcome these problems? Thank you for the question. It is a very complicated issue.
Follow with a close eye what's happening between the small island developing states. We happen to work with some of them because they have lots of small islands gravitating around them. To name a few, Cape Verde, Guinea-Bissau, Sao Tome and Principe, which are part also of this island alliance, AOSIS. You mentioned. What is interesting for us first is that these island states, they discuss together, and we've shown that their joint effort was heard during the last COP, for example, on the loss and damage aspects. So they've proven that their voice together can be heard, and now they're discussing their specificities. Again, they try to make heard that they should be considered as islands, and this islandness is not just something in the air. It has some specifics, and plastic is one of them. There are some special needs when it comes to plastic. If any one of you was in the hospital not that long ago, or asked somebody, and like God forbid, but you can see that plastic can be useful. So this is a very tricky topic, but I think it resonates with the specificity of islandness, something that Europe has heard with the outermost regions, as Carlos was pointing out, understanding their needs and specificities, dedicating specific programs, and so in line with what is discussed on the plastics is something we pay very much attention to, and we've made a small work, I mean actually quite big for our small organization. We mapped all the organizations and networks that work with islands, being a country as an administrative unit, but also very tiny spots, tiny islands, and try to understand better who is doing what and where. And we realized that the topic of plastic is a very interesting one when it comes to understand, explore, and explain the specificities of islands. So we'll not dive into the arguments that they put out there, but I think it resonates here with the need to understand islands as they are and their specificities as an organic something. Yes.
¿Alguien tiene una pregunta o sigo yo aquí hablando? Porque me gustaría que alguien...
Any more questions? A microphone, a roving mic for the floor. Questions from the floor, please. Hey, my grandfather came from Cuba, from the Caribbean, and personally I don't see the Caribbean as a particularly corrupt place. I have a different idea to you. We can talk about that later. My question is from Magali, because we have Hannah, sorry. We have projects in the Caribbean on small islands. Providencia, the island of Providencia in Colombia, which is a very small island, yes, certainly. And talking about governance, we had international conflict in the Caribbean because of the huge amounts of litter reaching our shores from other countries, and this is affecting our economy, tourism, and so on and so forth. So Puerto Rico is a small island. You need to overcome internal conflicts, but do you also have to face up to international conflicts? Or are you in the first phase? You're trying to tackle your internal problems before you then move on to tackling the international conflicts. Now, if you look at Europe and all of these transnational projects, this is a different level entirely, but I think that really, if you look at the Caribbean, we're lagging behind in terms of international governance. Yes, certainly, I do fully agree with your sentiments. Yes, we are trying to work first on an internal level, because we are territories, units. There we have Puerto Rico and the rest of the situation in the rest of the Caribbean. No? No. For someone that represents a chapter for a waste management organization, in fact, we are an arm of ISWA, which is the International Solid Waste Association, and we are a chapter for the Caribbean. And work is very complicated, very complex. I try to take global data and then come back to this idea of the oil that moves the wheel. No, we're trying to make things work. Now, I come from Puerto Rico, but we have restrictions imposed upon us because of the United States. We are an island state of the United States, and then we have the U.S. Virgin Islands as well. That is another world entirely. So if we talk about having region-wide efforts, no, even if you have
15 minutos, pues porque nuestras
tiny little islands, it's as a crow flies, only 15 minutes away, no? But we, in our efforts, look more towards the United States, no, in the work of our local agencies, and we have more of a free state approach on our island. But certainly, no, this is more for this evening's beer rather than the discussions to have over a coffee. But really, I certainly am driven to look for new solutions and not to swim against the tide. We need to be able to working with our neighboring countries and states. No? And Puerto Rico in the past has received glass for recycling from other countries and islands from the rest of the Caribbean. We have a bottle recycling plant in Illinois where this is then recycled. But then we have all the red tape. We have the Jones Act as well. No, this is a law that prevents us from having any kind of economic exchange or import-export processes with direct ports that do not go first through a U.S. port. So this is certainly an administrative hurdle to us working with other islands in the Caribbean. So certainly I will continue to work towards finding solutions that work. But for now, for the rest of the Caribbean, we continue to be the gringo islands, no? The United States islands in the Caribbean, gazing towards the north, and therefore this means that there's not a level playing field there, So certainly, yes, we have to help ourselves first if we're then going to be able to help others. But we're not lacking in interest. This is true. No, we are Caribbeans. We are in the same sea. The Cubans are our brothers and sisters. The Dominican Republic are the same. And, we do have this culture of fraternity, and we do want to be on the same page, row in the same direction. But quite simply, there are political obstacles that really cause all kinds of conflicts and problems. But then we could take the United Nations as a goal, no? And this could bring about something achievable for an entire region.
Any other questions? We have some time, unless you are extremely hungry. I can't see if there's anyone there, because there's... Good. Hello. Thank you, all speakers, for this interesting debate. There's a brief question here for Carlos and for Hannah. Carlos, you've mentioned the new Interreg projects with African countries, and I think you didn't mention Morocco. And I'm just bringing this up because in this global and common scenario, we have Morocco just in front of the Canary coast, and I believe the problem that represents the arrival of marine litter coming from that country can be a very interesting common point to be developed in different projects across not only Morocco and the Canary Islands, but also Europe. And for Hannah, as a global problem, Puerto Rico has the shade of the US with a very well-known consumption dynamic that is the one originating the problem we have in terms of litter. And do you know if the US is bringing any kind of funding to manage waste and to avoid this problem, especially now that the consumerism and consumption is a problem in Puerto Rico too, because it's mirrored on the pattern sent by the US. Please go ahead. Thank you for your question. It is a very interesting topic, and we still say that there is a bit of Spain is in our blood. But yeah, we do have this intense consumerism in our veins that is sent to us by the American nation. To answer your question in terms of funds for waste management, the EPA formulates a series of grants, or proposes a series of grants in the shape of funds for different jurisdictions or states. However, and ever since I started working on the field of industrial engineering, I've seen that through the history of the health engineering, which is its main definition, the availability of funds that existed back in time to develop infrastructures to manage water or wastewater or drinking water did not necessarily exist at the US for the management of waste. And nowadays, the Environmental Protection Agency has a program that is called Sustainable Materials Management, and partially they are starting to offer some grants. But it is not necessarily being done or in equal or can be compared to what happened back in the 70s or 80s for the management of water. There are grants, indeed, but you need to look for them. And honestly speaking, to access those grants, you have to do it in English. You have to, and this is also an obstacle in Puerto Rico, where translation makes us lose money most of the times. And yeah, we're not talking about maybe incompetence, but it's a lack of access probably for the 78 municipalities of the island. Yeah, thank you very much for your question. Then we can speak about this later if you want. But yes, we do have grants at hand. But first, we get the legal order before the funds are available to improve landfill. Thank you, Hannah. Now I'd like to answer your question, Oliver. Yes, Morocco, surprisingly, is not in this list of African countries in the cooperation program. Côte d'Ivoire, Ghana, Gambia, São Tomé y Príncipe, Morocco. Morocco is not included because they had their own project that was on the POP effects, which is to promote the external borders, and it's a program that hasn't been renewed, and this is why Morocco is out of this cooperation program at the moment. They should have been there because the problem that most of the problems we have in the Canary Islands in terms of marine litter comes from Morocco, but there is a greater problem that needs to be tackled, which is migration. This cooperation program that for 21-27 is mainly focused on migrations because it's a ticking bomb, especially for the Canary Islands. Migration or illegal or uncontrolled migration coming from Africa following its humanitarian situation is a priority for these cooperation programs, and most funds will be derived to create expectations for locals so they don't need to migrate to Europe to get a future. We are aware that it won't be enough, so that's why we need to reinforce here at the destination of migrants our strategies and infrastructures to welcome them at least momentaneously, because our islands is a limited territory, but we are well aware, on the other hand, that in this century we are living in, there will be a great flow of migrations, and to manage this will leave waste management in a second line. So it is 1:58. If you have any very short question that can be answered with a very short answer, I'll let you ask questions, but feel free to talk to them at the coffee break and ask them whatever you may want to know. So thank you very much. And thank you for being here with us today.